have a very special guest tonight. My goodness, Andrew Berman, the Executive Director of the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation.
That's
I said it right, right?
You did.
I hope I did.
It's a mouthful.
You tell me about it? Wow, I have to rehearse that one again. But before we get into this exquisite conversation, there's a lot of things that I want to ask you. I know your deep sense of community and your love for the city, man, and you got what it takes. But before we do this, I want to just send my love to Leland Gant. I guess I get it right. I went to the actor's studio, Lisa Kemp, my wonderful, beautiful, remarkable acting coach. She said, Sissy, you got to go. You guys got to go and support this man, this member of the actor's studio. I was there last night, and it was exquisite. A one-man show taking place. It's free. You guys can call the actor's studio to make reservations. It was so wonderful.
Wow.
We're talking about 12 years a slave, and racism is an issue.
Sure.
So I highly recommend it, and I just wanted to bring that up.
No
but
taken.
now, Andrew, it's all about you and me.
Great.
And the rest of the city.
Let's talk.
Let me tell you something. You've been around.
Mm-hmm.
We know what you do, right?
Sure.
It's a battle. It's a fight.
I've been doing it for 12 years now.
For 12 years now. I want to hear about your beginning. I want to hear about your background, how you decided to do this, and why.
Sure.
What drove you to this?
Well, I grew up in New York. I'm a lifelong New Yorker. Actually, both my parents grew up here as well. And I grew up in the Bronx, and I grew up in a place that was built as one of these, sort of huge urban renewal schemes in the late 1960s, Co-op City. And it was so connected to all of these big decisions that were made in that time of how they were going to reshape the city, many of which were not very wise decisions. They ended up involving destroying communities, like communities in the South Bronx. So I kind of grew up always with this sense that big plans that are not the right plans can really destroy the city, hurt the city, and that there were wonderful things about the history of our city that were fragile, and that it was really important that we try to hold on to. And I got that from my parents. I got that from where I grew up in, the environment that I grew up in. So when I was growing up in New York City, I was just really always interested in exploring, every corner of the city, knowing more about the history, appreciating the unique environments. And it's what I studied in school. And then after I graduated from school, I ended up working actually in politics on the west side of Manhattan with communities like Greenwich Village and Chelsea and Hell's Kitchen. And so 12 years ago, when this position opened up as the executive director of the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation.
That's a long one. You got to breathe.
It's a long one.
You got to take it. Okay, I'm sorry for interrupt. I shouldn't interrupt.
But it was a perfect fit for me. So I've been there now for over a decade, and I love it.
And you love it, but it's a lot of pressure too.
Yes. Yeah, it's
right?
a lot of pressure.
I mean, it's like, how do you do it? How do you make it work?
Well, first of all, you have to love what you do. As they say, if you love what you do, it's not work.
But it is.
Yeah. Well, it's work in that you're doing a lot, and it's long hours, but you're really enjoying it, and it's motivated by your passion, not by just a sense of obligation or punching a clock. These are neighborhoods that have, kind of some of the greatest history and architecture and just wonderful, sort of cultural history, writers, artists that are connected to it. And it's so precious and it's so fragile, and you don't want to see it lost. So it's really, I consider it an honor that I get the opportunity to work every day to help protect that, to help do research on it, to document it. And the other big thing that we do is we educate the public about the process. The way planning works in New York and the way the decision-making process goes for how our city is sort of built and how communities change is so arcane and so complicated that we need people who can help us to understand the process and help us to engage it, to plug us into it, so that the average person can actually have an impact. I mean, I've been doing it as a professional. I've been at GVSHP for 12 years. For 8 years before that, I worked in government. So I've been doing this for 20 years, and I'm still learning. And here I've been a professional doing it for 20 years. So for the average person who wants to have an impact, you really need a lot of help in order to understand how to do that.
Right, but people, because history is not easy. I mean, people, they don't seem to be, sometimes like they want to preserve, but You understand what I'm saying? You
yeah.
can have a very deep sense of community, but you have to educate the people too.
You have to educate people about why this is important.
Why it's meaningful, why we have to do what we have to do.
And I would say this, you know, even for people who don't necessarily have sort of like an academic knowledge of like, oh, this took place here, or this is what this architectural style looks like, they do have everybody has a sense of, this is what I love and appreciate and recognize about my community, this is what makes it special to me, this is what makes it different and distinctive to me. We all have that no matter what part of the city we call our own. And those are the things that we really work to try to give people a deeper understanding of and to help them understand how they can work to hold on to them.
Now, question. How do we preserve the city? How we make the city ours? Because we have, as we know, there's a lot of money taking place, a lot of politics, a lot of corporations out there who come here and they say, okay, now is my time. I'm going to bring, right, more buildings, right? There's more money coming in. So how do you guys do it? I mean, this is a battle.
It is a
You're
battle.
in the trenches.
We're in the
How
trenches.
do you make it work? Because this is a lot of money coming to the city.
Yeah, and we don't win every time, but we do often win, and I feel like we always move the needle. The important thing is, you know, we live in a democracy, but, you know,
But you thought about it. For a moment, you hesitated.
Yeah, because, you know, I put a little asterisk next to that. You know, technically speaking, everybody's equal, but without a doubt, the people who have more money, the people who have more access to the decision makers, the people who have a greater understanding of how the system works are going to be able to work the levers a lot better than the average person. So a lot of what we do is we help the average person, the average resident of our neighborhood, to understand how the levers work, what they need to do in order to affect them, and we educate them about what the decision makers are doing so that when they, for instance, go to the voting booth, they can make good decisions about who to vote for and who not to vote for. We're a 501c3, so we can never tell people this is who to vote for, but we do tell people this is what your elected officials are doing, this is what are important decisions that are being made that are going to affect you, and that you should vote. What you then do with that information is up to you. Yeah.
Right, but it's not an easy job because a lot of people, they go and vote, and they don't even know who are these people.
Well, I mean, the percentage of people that vote in our municipal elections is embarrassingly low. So, but the good news about that is means there's room for growth. You know, if we can get a few more people, a fraction more involved in the process, that'll make a huge difference.
And you think that's going to change?
I do think it's going to change. I think it has to change because there's so much pressure on the city. I also think, you know, we're entering a new era here in New York City. We're going to have a new mayor. We're going to have a largely new city council, definitely a new speaker. Here in Manhattan, we're going to have a new borough president who we were just talking about. And things are definitely going to be different. Now, I take nothing for granted about, I'm not in any way saying everything's now going to be wonderful, we can just sit back and relax and all the decisions are going to be the right one and everything's going to turn out peaches and cream, but it's definitely going to be different. And I think the fact that things are going to work differently is going to make people realize, oh, you know, I got frustrated, I got jaded, I thought, you know, this is the way it's always going to be. It's now going to be different, and it's going to present you with opportunities to have an impact on what that's going to be like.
Now, let me ask you, do you get turned off by politics? Do you get turned off by what's going on, closed door, behind doors? Because as we know, people, we don't know everything.
Sure.
And information is powerful.
Yes.
Knowledge is we don't have access to every single piece of information. We don't.
Right.
So how do you feel about what's happening? Closed doors, that's number one. Number two, does it turn you on? Does it turn you off? I mean, I want to hear what people want to hear.
Sure. It's a little bit of each. You know, I definitely often find myself kind of disgusted and frustrated, honestly, by some of the people who are involved in the process and some of the ways in which it works, because it's often based on a lot of deception and kind of keeping information from people and trying to pretend that things are one way when they're really another. On the other hand, I see those levers working, and it energizes me to think if I can impact that, I can make a difference.
Right.
And it's very rare that a day goes by that I don't feel like we've been able to affect the conversation and affect the outcome at least somewhat. We don't always get all of what we want, but it's very rare that I feel like, oh, you know what, what we did made no difference whatsoever. I mean, even in the cases where, let's say, I'll give you an example. So in the case of the NYU expansion plan, which was something that we and many people in our neighborhood fought very, very hard against, the fact that we fought so hard against it, we made a small dent in what was ultimately approved, and we're now in court to try to get it overturned.
There's a lawsuit going on.
But
Yes.
by raising the profile of the issue so high, the decision makers who supported it paid a very, very high price for doing so, and I think much more so than they expected to. So if we had a little bit of an effect in the outcome in terms of what they decided to approve, but I think we had a huge effect in terms of the decision makers, that it became attached to them in a negative way for a lot of people, that they
Right.
were the ones who were responsible for this. So and that's going to have an impact down the road. That's going to make the next round of elected officials and decision makers think hard about doing something similar, because they're going to know, well, look what happened last time when somebody did something similar.
Right, but everything brings consequences.
It does, and that's part of what we do. We make sure that there are consequences, positive
Right.
and negative, for decisions that are made that affect our communities and our lives.
Right, because Columbia University, NYU, I mean, the amount of, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an enormous, I mean, it's been generations since we've seen so much going on in New York. And, there should be change, there should be development, but it's got to be smart. It's got to be the right
But you think it's going to
kind.
get done? Because this is, and Gloria, I'm addressing my attention to you and Dacian. I would like to have the lower thirds. I'm not directing my show, but a woman has got to do what a woman has to do. I need to see those lower thirds. Gloria Messer, I love you, and Dacian and Arthur. And if we don't have them, it seems to be a problem. Oh, well, okay, so the system's down. That's okay. It happens. This is a live show, guys. Let's not panic. Mama's in the house, so we are in control, Andrew.
Right.
I mean, your hands are full. You have to admit it.
Yes, very full, very full. We don't have a lot of free time on our hands.
So when you go to work, I mean, how does it work? Give me a breakdown of your day, a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. If I'm allowed to know.
Sure, no, of course. We have a small office. We have a staff of 6, which actually for a neighborhood preservation organization is huge. We're the largest one like this in the city. We work in this great environment where we work in something called the Neighborhood Preservation Center, where we're surrounded by other community-based groups that do similar work to us, so there's a wonderful synergy there. Every day we're fielding inquiries from the public about things that are going on in the neighborhood. We're putting together research that helps to document why the neighborhood is so important. We do programs at night, book talks, walking tours, lectures, panel discussions about important issues past and present in the neighborhood. And we spend a lot of time doing advocacy work, which is, we're reaching out to elected officials, the community board, various community groups to get them involved and organize them to say, look, here's this big new issue. Like, for instance, just earlier this week, we conducted a town hall on this new provision passed by the state legislature that allows air rights from the Hudson River Park to be sold.
I just signed the
and
bill.
Cuomo signed it, actually, literally as we were having the town hall, which we knew he was going to sign it. So it wasn't a big surprise. The timing was a little funny because it's literally as we're talking about it, but we knew it was going to get signed into law. And what we were there to do was to say, look, this is going to be a new landscape we face. How are we going to deal with it? How are we going to make sure it doesn't end up hurting our neighborhood, which it easily could?
Right. What people tell you when you go to those meetings? What do they say to you? Are they upset, frustrated? I mean, what do they tell you?
There's a lot of frustration out there. A lot of people feel powerless. A lot of people feel that they're seeing changes in their communities that they don't like and that they don't have a say over. One of the things that we try to do is, the bad things that you prevent, people either forget about it or they don't even know that it happened. So we say, look, we know that there are some changes that you don't like. You got to remember the bad things that could have happened that we prevented or that we made a little bit better. We always try to give people hope and encouragement because the fact of the matter is they are affecting the outcome. The outcome may not always be exactly what they want, but it would have been so much worse had they not been involved. So that's one of the things that we tell people is, I understand your frustration, take it and channel it and keep working, and don't think that you're not having an impact, because in fact, you really are. We actually recently put together a report that looks at the last 10 years of what we've been able to do under Bloomberg, who, most people would say not necessarily the best friend to preservation, certainly has pushed forward a lot of huge development plans, but even during his tenure, in the last 10 years, in our neighborhoods, we got 1,000 buildings landmarked, which is a huge amount. We got 100 blocks of our neighborhood rezoned to help protect the character of the neighborhood. There were a lot of projects that were put forward that we blocked, plans for huge towers on Bleecker Street and the Meatpacking District and all these other places that could have been part of our neighborhood but are not. And then there's a lot of other projects that may have been passed but were passed in a